Standing uncommonly resolute for a foot monster at number 10 is Slate Warrior. Originally available in limited capacity as a Secret Rare promo with copies of Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournament 2004 for the Game Boy Advance, alongside Cypher Soldier and Fairy Cal Truesdale. Slate Warrior got a little easier to get in 2006 when it was included with Tournament Pack 8, and finally released widely with Structure Deck Lord of the Storm later that year. While most flip monsters are lacking in the stat department, Slate Warrior is a level 4 Wind Fiend that packs an impressive 1900 attack. It's only got 400 defense, but when it's flipped face up, Slate Warrior gains an additional 500 to both stats. A 1900 attack normal with an alternative mechanic to boost itself up to 2400 already isn't bad by 2004 standards. But Slate Warrior actually has one more effect. If destroyed by battle, the monster that got it loses 500 attack and defense. While neither of Slate Warrior's effects are much better than just being a 1900 attack normal summon 20 years ago, the debuff it puts on enemy monsters is a nice consolation for when you set Slate Warrior is destroyed before you can actually get it flipped for its stat boost. While it doesn't see use in the modern day, it did have a scattering of competitive placements back in 2006. And it's a decent option to consider when deck building for GOAT format. Many GOAT flip strategies revolve around summoning and resummoning the spirit monster Tsukiyomi, who can flip or unflip a monster on the field. While Tsukiyomi strats are more commonly involved with other flip monsters that we'll tackle later on this list, Slate Warrior isn't a bad add for these strategies, since it does something other flip monsters don't: put up decent numbers. While not particularly relevant to the Duel Monsters anime, Slate Warrior did have 2 appearances. Once in episode 114 during the Virtual World arc, when it was used by Seto Kaiba against Noah Kaiba, and again in episode 186 during the duel where Yugi used a Kaiba Land gas deck to square off against a Kaiba Corp computer gone haywire. The kid, Rick, whose deck Yugi used pretty much included only normal dragons, except notably Heart of the Underdog and Spirit Ryu, when the computer's deck included strong normal summons like Slate Warrior and Berserk Gorilla. But more interesting than Slate Warrior's anime appearance is its OCG name, and censored card art. The original name of Slate Warrior is Niyuto, meaning nipple in Japanese. This makes a little more sense when compared alongside the original art, where Slate Warrior's red chest markings much more clearly resemble nipples. But although that is pretty cool, Slate Warrior can't go above the number 10 spot on this list, because the reason it's good has nothing to do with its flip effect. It's an interesting flip in that it brings skills to the table that other flips don't, and worthy of this list for that reason. But for the most part, the cards to come will earn their spot on this list through the strength of their flip activations. Before we jump back in, let me put you onto something crazy. How about getting 2 epic and 2 legendaries for free? This game has so much depth it can be overwhelming for new players, but don't worry, they've got you covered. Right now, you can grab Drake and TALLIA, 2 powerful epic champions, just by using my special link in the description or scanning the QR code on screen. And that's not all. Use the promo code MonkeyKing and you'll get a legendary Sun Wukong for free. For me personally, I actually love how detailed the customization is for each champion. I don't know about you guys, but games with tons of customization and min-maxing just scratches my brain just right. But the real highlight? The Alice's Adventure event is live, bringing 5 brand new legendary champions based in Alice in Wonderland. Alice the Wanderer, Cheshire Cat, Mad Hatter, Knave of Hearts, and the fearsome Queen of Hearts. Log in for 7 days to claim Alice the Wanderer for free, and if you keep playing, you'll earn a 2-star Perfect Soul for her too. Want more rewards? Conquer the Queen of Hearts dungeon from now until March 5th to earn exclusive loot. And yes, all 5 new legendaries can be earned through this event this month. So what are you waiting for? Click my link below or scan the QR code to grab your free epic champions, legendary Sun Wukong, and exclusive event rewards. But hurry, because these offers won't last forever. Also, come find me in game. My name's TheDuelLogs, and if you're looking for a squad, join my clan, Heroes Cool Squad. And at number 9, we've got the Fire Plant Flip Rigorous Reaver. This level 3 has an impressive 1600 attack and easily forgettable 100 defense, and released at the tail end of the classic era as part of Champion Pack 6 only a few months before the dawn of Synchros. With a wider release as part of Gold Series 2009, it's not really shocking that Rigorous Reaver hasn't seen much competitive play from when it was new all the way to now. But this card does some interesting things worth talking about. For starters, the flip effect. When this card is flipped, both players must discard a card. While this might seem like a double-edged sword, a well-timed discard can be desirable for many strategies, especially as more and more cards prefer a spot and grave over hand. 1600 attack is a decent stat line for a low level, and gives Rigorous Reaver some flexibility in terms of how you play it. If your set Slate Warrior gets destroyed, well, sorry, that sucks. You won't get its attack boost. But when your opponent attacks into your Rigorous Reaver, it's probably because you wanted the flip discard. And on top of it, Rigorous Reaver also shares Slate Warrior's effect of giving the monster destroyed by battle a -500 to both attack and defense. But there's actually even more interesting things to do with Rigorous Reaver. For the release of the Mimigo archetype in 2024's The Infinite Forbidden set, players now have a decently easy toolkit for setting monsters from your deck to your opponent's field and force flipping them, all without burning a normal summon. While the most obvious synergy here is with laughably bad cards like Fire Sorcerer that force your opponent to discard 2 at random for a paltry burn, there's a niche for bizarre cards like Rigorous Reaver too. Unlike Fire Sorcerer, Rigorous Reaver's discard is chosen and not random, which does make it less disruptive overall, but gives you an interesting route into activating cards like Elephant Statue of Disaster or Rainbow Overlord of Dark World, or really any Dark World card that scales off of being discarded by your opponent's effect. The relationship between Rigorous Reaver and Slate Warrior actually runs deeper than just being bizarrely high stat flip monsters with a shared ult effect. In episode 63 of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, Dark Signer Rex Goodwin engages Yusei, Crow, Hogan, and Jack Atlas in a huge tag turbo duel to determine the fate of the world. Jack Atlas flips a trap card half straight, which depicts both Rigorous Reaver and Slate Warrior, in addition to translucent Red Ogre. The artwork of this trap seems to reveal that the mouth of Rigorous Reaver contains an eye, or something similar. Perhaps it's not shocking that the card showing this particular stylistic showdown between Rigorous Reaver and the Nipple Warrior did not get printed into the TCG. And sliding into number 8 is the iconic level 2 Aqua Flip from starter deck Joey, Penguin Soldier. Its 750 attack and 500 defense aren't too terribly bad for a level 2, but being a level 2 Water Aqua can be good even on its own. But more on that in a second, because Penguin Soldier brings more to the table than just its favorable card categorization. When it flips, you can target not just 1, but 2 monsters on the field and return them to hand. This was a big jump over previous return to hand flipping mainstay Hane from the Legend of Blue Eyes White Dragon set, who could only return 1 monster. Penguin Soldier ups the flip distribution ante from just slowing your opponent down to actively setting them back. If your opponent attacks into and destroys your Penguin Soldier, it's fine because you can bounce twice as many cards as you lost. And Penguin Soldier did see a smattering of competitive placements as a result of this effect. But where Penguin Soldier saw the most early play was in the super casual playground format, where its accessibility as a confirmed card in starter deck Joey made it a staple for target removal. But it would actually take Penguin Soldier almost a decade to start seeing real competitive experimentation, which took off in 2013 with the powerful Mermail and Atlantean water strategies. It also saw niche experimentation in Dragon Ruler decks alongside title Dragon Ruler Waterfalls, and would go on to find use in Paleozoic frog strategies. Since the Paleozoics were able to summon themselves from the grave as level 2 Aqua monsters, this gave Penguin Soldier the flexibility to be used for its flip effect, or as a material for Totally Awesome, or both, clearing your vulnerable flip Penguin Soldier as material for an Omnigate. Next one's coming in hot from 2003's Magician 4 set. As far as flip effects go, Magical Merchant is a pretty good deal. A level 1 light insect with 200 attack and 700 defense, Magical Merchant stats are pretty much irrelevant. This card is all about the flip, so let's dive into it. When Magical Merchant is flip face up, you begin excavating cards off the top of your deck and do not stop until you hit a spell or trap card. At that point, the revealed card is added to your hand, and all previously excavated cards are dumped into the grave. The utility provided by this effect is both huge and broadly applicable. Basically, any monster-heavy deck that likes a bustling graveyard can find benefit from Magical Merchant. Running zombies? Magical Merchant can fill your deck with Mezukis and Plague Spreader zombies. Fan of Chimera Tech OTK? Use Magical Merchant to fish for Overlord Fusion while filling your grave with an army of machines to power up your Chimera Tech Overdragon. Plug Magical Merchant into your generic Dark Pile for ultimate swag points when you dig out Monster Reincarnation to recur an OTK primed Rainbow Dark Dragon. Or more realistically, Magical Merchant can be good for getting Felis Lightsworn Archer, or Wolf Lightsworn Beast in grave and on the field per their meal effects. Put a bunch of whites in grave to summon a monstrously swole King of Skull Servants, surprise your opponent with something unhinged like Dimensional Fissure plus Magical Merchant to milled power Grand Majida Aiza 1-punch KO. You can do bizarre and crazy things with Magical Merchant, and while you probably won't always win, the times you do will be worth the effort. But anyway, back in the classic Yu-Gi-Oh era, the game was slow enough for Magical Merchant to actually be pretty good. It commonly saw play in decks like Zombies, but also in Monarchs and many Chaos decks that benefited from ample bodies in Grave. And it still sees play in GOAT decks today, with the added benefit of being able to mill for Metamorphosis, which can then trade your spent Magical Merchant out for the copy of Thousand Eyes Restrict. If you have cards in deck that you need in Grave, Magical Merchant's running a sale that you'll be interested in. With minor appearances in Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds and the Bonds Beyond Time movie, Magical Merchant's big on-field anime debut came with episode 142 of the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, where it was used by the dual Spirit of Skull Knight against Axel Brody. Nothing too major, but Magical Merchant does have one more noteworthy feature, and that's in the artwork of the card Sales Ban. Looks like some royal goons have caught on to how powerful this humble insect merchant can be. And at number 6, we have Cyberjar. This level 3 Dark Rock with 900 attack and defense from the 2002 set Magic/Spell Ruler was explosively powerful and packs the ban history to prove it. When Cyberjar is flipped, the entire field blows up. Everyone's monsters are destroyed, and then the fun starts. After the blast, both players reveal 5 cards from the top of their deck. All level 4 or lower monsters must immediately be special summoned in either attack position or face down defense position. Other cards, high level monsters, spells, traps, etc. are added to the hand. And because the fun keeps going, if your opponent triggers a Cyberjar activation by attacking into it during the battle phase, any monster they summon in attack mode have the option to just keep attacking since the battle phase remains ongoing. When Cyberjar flips, a bunch of stuff happens, and then stuff keeps happening. It's chaotic and dangerous, and ultimately powerful enough to get Cyberjar banned into the sun from 2006 all the way until 2022, when it was let back into the game at 1 copy. Luckily, since its outright ban started in 2006, you can run a copy of Cyberjar in your GO decks to keep things spicy. Together, alongside another card that's going to come up a little later on this list, Cyberjar is a critical component of the Empty Jar strategy, which aims to mill all of your opponent's cards and catch a cheeky win on deck out. But the sheer explosive potential of Cyberjar is noteworthy, both in terms of destruction and degeneration. The Cyberjar taketh away, but also giveth. And it gaveth a bunch of anime appearances in Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters. First, used by Bandit Keith in episode 50 while he was possessed by Merrick Ishtar, Cyberjar would be used again just a couple of episodes later by a Carpet Corp dual computer in episode 54. It's used 2 more times during Noah Kaiba's Virtual World arc, once by Lecture Jinzo against Seto in episode 108, and again by the Pharaoh against Noah Kaiba himself in episode 117. And keep an eye out for the number 5, because it's a flip effect you do not want to attack into. Gravekeeper Spy is a level 4 Dark Spellcaster with 1200 attack and 2000 defense, and released into 2003's Pharaonic Guardian along with other such notable Gravekeeper cards as Guard, Assailant, and Spear Soldier. When Gravekeeper Spy flips, you're able to summon another Gravekeeper monster with 1500 or less attack from your deck. This is great floating. And with offensive cards like Spear Soldier, who has piercing damage, and Assailant, which can change the battle position of enemy monsters while Necro Valley is on the field, Spy had options right out the gate. And in GOAT, you can still see some of these cards used today. While the Gravekeeper Spy effect to summon Gravekeeper's Guard during your opponent's turn won't activate Guard's bounce to hand flip effect, but running Tsukiyomi in your GOAT Gravekeeper strat, you can flip Guard, or if your Spy is still around, you can even flip it instead to play another Gravekeeper. But the real secret of Spy's competitive success was versatility. As a Gravekeeper with less than 1500 attack, it could special summon itself. This made running Spy for stall or bodies super convenient, since if you didn't want to run a lot of Gravekeepers, you could choose to just run 2 copies of Gravekeeper Spy and see full value. From the start, Spy, understandably, saw huge amounts of play. In Monarch decks that really valued having bodies on field to tribute, Gravekeeper Spy was a reliable set to keep you flush with resources. In Teledad strategies, Gravekeeper Spy could both stall and supply dark monsters, either to prepare for Dark Armed Dragon's summon condition, or to further extend its destructive potential once on the field. In 2010, Gravekeeper support gave Spy new targets to summon, with Gravekeeper's Descendant being particularly strong, since it could tribute Spy to pop an opponent's card. Although Spy still remained the most common target for another Spy to bring out. Synchro Cat strategies sometimes utilize Gravekeeper Spy, and would often run Book of Moon at 3 for the option to recycle their Spy, and other powerful flip effects. By the early 2010s, and with a smattering of placements in the decade's later years, Gravekeepers were their own bona fide anti-meta strategy. Built around locking down the graveyard with their field spell Necro Valley, searchable by Gravekeeper's Commandant, and using powerful spells and traps like Book of Moon and the Solemns to stop the other plays while sustaining their own field through the summon of their Search of Gravekeeper Spy and Gravekeeper's Recruiter. By the time Gravekeeper's Nobleman was released in 2014, Spy and Gravekeepers overall were seeing less play as a dedicated strategy, but Nobleman was still a great option to float into from Spy, since upon destruction, Nobleman could then float into another set Spy, that could then float into a Nobleman again and into Spy. This was pretty good stall and Duel Links for a while too. And all aboard for number 4, it's Dekoichi, the Battlechanted Locomotive. Another level 4 dark monster, but it's a machine this time. With 1400 attack and 1000 defense, this fiendish train has been flipped since 2004's Rise of Destiny. While Gravekeeper Spy required you to run at least one other Gravekeeper's card, Cyber Jar could blow back on you, and Magical Merchant could only work with specific deck comps, Dekoichi the Battlechanted Locomotive combined decent stats with a flip effect so generically good, you could run it in almost anything. On a Dekoichi flip, you could draw a card. Then, if you happen to control any face-up copies of the level 2 normal Bokoichi, the Frightening card, you got to draw additional cards equal to the number of Bokoichis. The Bokoichi part of Dekoichi's effect didn't see much use, but it's still possible to unexpected die out Bokoichi and then use machine duplication to spawn a few more, and then do a same turn Dekoichi flip for a Book of Taiyu to draw 4 and have enough bodies for a Link 4. But other cards aside, thankfully for Battlechanted Locomotive, being both a respectable low-level normal summon and flip draw card were enough to see a large amount of competitive experimentation. While not overtly threatening, 1400 attack wasn't ignorable, and that combined with Dekoichi's draw made the card a great piece for controlling the pace of the duel. Unless resorting to battle, your opponent would have to use a card to get rid of Dekoichi, and when they did, they'd go -1, since the cost of the lost train has been offset by its card go. And even if they do destroy Dekoichi by battle, that's time bought for nothing since the draw makes the card advantage return neutral. Dekoichi was huge in Monarch decks, and commonly was splashed into many other strategies, including Chaos, Chimera Tech, and even Dark Worlds. It comboed with UFO Turtle and Machine aggro decks to keep card counts high while relying on high attack beaters like Mechanical Chaser and X-Head Cannon, and these combos can still be seen today in GOAT format, where Dekoichi finds wide use in strategies of every speed from turbo to flip control. Taya Gardner's favorite card is also number 3 on this list. Magician of Faith is a level 1 light spellcaster with 300 attack and 400 defense that released back in 2002 as part of the Metal Raiders set. Magician of Faith's effect is very simple and very powerful. On flips, you can retrieve a spell card from the graveyard and add it back to your hand. There are other flip cards that do similar things with low-level monsters and traps, and those are Ducker Mobile Cannon and Mask of Darkness, and they are also not as good as Magician of Faith. That's because, like Magician of Faith, many strong spells are both simple and powerful. Monster Reborn summons a monster from either graveyard. Raigeki destroys all of your opponent's monsters. Harpy's Feather Duster clears their back row. Delinquent Duo tears apart their hand, and Metamorphosis can trade a Magician of Faith out for a Thousand Eyes Restrict since she's level 1. All of these mentioned spells have been limited and banned for extensive periods of time, and are still forbidden and might be forever. And it's precisely because spells like these are so powerful that Magician of Faith was banned too. Fully barred for the first time in 2006, Magician of Faith wouldn't be allowed back into the TCG until 2014, outside of a few months of 2007 where it was briefly allowed at 1 and then swiftly rebanned. But GOAT format is time-locked before all of that, and you can run Magician of Faith at 3 there. This is big because even back then, some very powerful spells were locked to 1 copy. This includes the previously discussed Harpy's Feather Duster and Delinquent Duo, but also powerful spells like Pot of Greed and Graceful Charity that are super not permitted in the modern format. Like many of these other flips we're going to go over, Magician of Faith was commonly seen in slower strategies like Monarchs, but also found a place in any deck that was willing to commit a little harder for extra spells. A free retrieval of a spell from the grave is a blank check for some of the strongest effects in Yu-Gi-Oh! And for a time, it was well worth the glacial speed of a flip effect. Magician of Faith saw a large amount of experimentation in play until her banning, where usage understandably dropped off. By the time she was let back into the game, it was too late, and even her incredibly OP spell fetch couldn't justify plain generic flips. But she'll always have the odd jank player in GOAT format and also the Duel Monsters anime, where she had a high-profile appearance in episodes 12 and 13, where she was claimed as Taya's favorite card and later became Taya Gardner during the first shadow duel between the Spirits of the Millennium Puzzle and the Ring. Taya would again use Magician of Faith against My Valentine a few episodes later during the duel outside the gates of Pegasus' castle, but then the Magician wouldn't be played again until episode 111, where, in a hard pivot, she is used by the united digital ghost of the Big Five, occupying the avatar Tristan Taylor in their tag duel to take ownership of Yugimoto and Joey Wheeler's bodies. But enough about these simple yet powerful effects, it's time to get complicated. Number 2 on this list belongs to the certified goodest boy, Ryko Lightsworn Hunter. This level 2 light beast from 2008's Light of Destruction set just barely makes it onto this list, releasing only a scant handful of weeks before synchro monsters entered the game and blew the extra deck wide open. So, while that means we don't have GOAT format to talk about with this entry, we do have Edison format, which time locks the game until April of 2010, when the 75th Shonen Jump Championship was held in Edison, New Jersey. And Ryko? Ryko was good. Ryko was great. See, flip monsters have always struggled with this question. How do you redeem a slow mechanic? Cards like Magician of Faith and Dekoichi answer this question with a powerful effect, but Ryko iterates on their solution. Ryko Lightsworn Hunter has 2 powerful effects. When Ryko flips, 2 things happen at the same time. You get to non-target destroy a card of the field and mill 3 cards off the top of your deck at the same time. This is huge, and Ryko's activation advances the game state on multiple fronts, removing a piece of your opponent's board while setting up your graveyard. This was obviously strong in Ryko's home archetype, the Lightsworns, who rely on huge mills that fill both graveyards and also fields with cards like Felis Lightsworn Archer and Wolf Lightsworn Beast that special summon themselves and sent from the deck to the grave. Remember them back during the Magical Merchant part of this video? Well, they're back again, which is kind of fitting given their effects. Ryko also found frequent use in basically any strategy that liked cards in the graveyard. In Zector to power the graveyard with monster equips and Doomdozer plays, Ryko works. Chaos Dragons with cards like Eclipse Wyvern, Dark Flare Dragon, and Light Pulsar Dragon, Ryko was a common 3 of in that Juggernaut deck in 2012. Dragon Rulers, great place to run Ryko. Shaddolls, that's a fine deck for Ryko too. Dark Arm Dragon decks, would you look at the time, it's Ryko o'clock again. And its usage is doubly impressive, because often if a flip monster gets used this much, it's on a quick trip to the Forbidden List where it'll probably sit for years if not a decade. But Ryko nimbly dodges that fate that awaited so many other cards talked about here, and even many that aren't in this video. Flip monsters are fragile creatures. It's hard to tune one to be desirably good without breaking it, but Ryko flips his narrative and becomes a flip success story. And perhaps as a result has enjoyed a continued spot of relevance within the Yu-Gi-Oh ecosystem that extends past its competitive heyday. It's featured on numerous cards, including Charge of the Light Brigade, Dark Smog, Gaga Rush, Mono a Mono, and Dark World Brainwashing, in addition to its Dark Retrain Ryko Twilight Sworn Fighter. And coming in at number 1 for the best flip effect monster from classic Yu-Gi-Oh, we have a card both famous and infamous, Morphing Jar. This is a level 2 Earth Rock Ultra Rare from 2002's Tournament Pack 2. Morphing Jar would return as a super rare in 2003's Tournament Pack 4, before finally releasing widely in 2005's Dark Beginning 2. It has 700 attack and 600 defense, and a truly wild effect that can alter, upend, or even just end a game. When Morphing Jar flips, both players discard their entire hands. Then they draw 5 new cards. In future jars, Morphing Jar number 2 and Cyber Jars, cards drawn are revealed, but with the original morphing, both players hold their new acquisitions in their own confidence. This effect is not limited to once per turn, and instead only constrained by the flip mechanic. As long as you can keep flipping your Morphing Jar, you can keep resetting your hand and drawing 5. Beyond the immediate application of potentially unraveling an unfavorable game state by forcing a hand mulligan on both you and your opponent, Morphing Jar presents its own win condition. With decks commonly running only 40 cards, flipping your Morphing Jar 7 times can constitute a win by deck out. Minus the 5 cards your opponent will draw at the start of the duel, those 7 jar flips can be all you need. This is the crux of the strategy called Empty Jar. By relying on the book flip spells Book of Moon, Book of Taiyu, and Book of Eclipse, as well as other flipping tools like Tsukiyomi, A&D Changer, the idea of Empty Jar is to flip your Morphing Jar and other mills like Needleworm and Cyber Jar enough times that your opponent doesn't even get the chance to counter you. A Feather the Phoenix can discard your A&D Changers and other unneeded cards to recycle flip spells, or cards like One Day Apiece, which can just guarantee you another turn. The constant draws of Morphing Jar helped give you the gas needed to keep on constantly flipping, and other cards like Card and Hand Destruction help with drawing too. In longer games, you could even use Reckless Greed, since the strategy had so many other ways to pull cards outside of the draw phase. But ultimately, even beyond its gimmicky deck out strat, Morphing Jar was just a very, very powerful card, and found usage in a huge amount of decks. Monarchs, Machines, Bird, and even Gladiator Beasts. Dark Armed Dragon, Dark World, Quick Draw Synchron, Noble Knights, Morphing Jar was pretty much everywhere. It's been limited to one copy for pretty much forever, but Morphing Jar was there. And Morphing Jar was there for episode 37 of the Duel Monsters anime too. Yami Bakura used it to consume the souls of a bunch of Pegasus' henchmen, sending them to the graveyard where they were culled by the Reaper of the Guards. But there are even more gimmicky ways to use your Morphing Jar than destroying your opponent's soul. By combining it with Protector of the Sanctuary, which stops your opponent from drawing cards outside the draw phase, you can drop and restock your hand while depriving your opponent of the chance to replenish theirs. Force Requisition, which makes your opponent discard whenever you do, can be used to similar effect, forcing your opponent to discard every new card your Morphing Jar drew them. Combining Morphing Jar with any of the virus traps can put your opponent way on the back foot. By causing Mimigold Maker to set Morphing Jar to your opponent's field, you can discard multiple cards by an opponent's card effect, triggering your Dark Worlds and Elephant statues and more. It's rigorous Reaver turned up to 11. In conclusion, it's Morphing Jar and it's a cool card, and it's also number 1 on this list. One last time, grab your free Epic and Legendaries now. Hit the link in the description or scan the QR code before it's too late.